What's the craziest butterfly effect that happened to you because of a small decision you made? Story 1. My existence. When my dad was about 20, he needed a phone number, so he called the operator from a payphone. She gave him the number, he hung up, and she accidentally refunded the money back to the payphone. She called the payphone back and asked him if he could put the money back in, which he did and then hung up again. She accidentally refunded the money again and had to call back again to ask him to put the money back in. He did and hung up once more. She was so flustered that she refunded the money again and called back again, and my father got to chatting with her and got her number. They set up a date, which she stood him up for. Then she forgot his name when he called her again. Then they actually got coffee, and 4 years later they were married. This coming August, it will be 50 years for them. If my dad hadn't needed that phone number, I wouldn't be here. Story 2. My desire for pizza set off a chain reaction that destroyed my family. One day I got home from school and really wanted pizza. My family was poor, so spontaneous food trips weren't always possible. I really worked my pouty face to my mom and begged to go to the local pizza place for dinner. She said, all right. While sitting there, I saw my uncle walk by, and I was like, wait, Uncle X, is that you? Now you might say, well, he wanted pizza. What's the big deal? Well, he lives several states away, so to randomly be in town and not tell anyone was strange. It turned out he was having an affair with his sister-in-law, my aunt on the other side of the family. She was basically greedy and the family protested. One thing led to another and everyone hated each other, and we haven't had contact in like 20 years. I just wanted some pizza. Story 3. I was given 2 start dates for an entry-level job in a large organization. The date I chose to start led to working in a small but high-profile team, so I got lots of exposure with senior management and became the can-do guy who would fix a million tiny problems. That recognition led to promotions, a fantastic career, further professional qualifications, and working overseas for several years. I also met my best friend and my partner. If I had chosen the other date, I would have been sent to a data processing pool and been fairly anonymous. Story 4. 4 years ago, a kid I barely knew from school invited me to Six Flags. I was a bit of a loner at the time, and I had heard rumors about this kid being weird, so I intended not to go. On the day he wanted me to go, I was feeling extra bored and decided on a whim, why not? So I went and met this kid and 2 of his friends I had never met at Six Flags. 4 years later, that kid is my best friend, and I have 3 other very close friends I met through him. Not only that, but I also met my first girlfriend because of the connections some of my new friends had. It transformed my high school years from being alone to having an amazing group of friends I could do almost anything with. I intend to ask my best friend to be my best man one day, and I don't plan on ever losing touch with any of them. I'm home from college now, and we are going to have a lot of fun together. Best decision I ever made. Story 5. I decided to approach a girl in a wheelchair in a bar because I thought it was cool of her to be out and about having a good time. We became bar buddies. A week later, she brought a friend with her. I got along with the friend. We started dating, we married, and we had a daughter. Had I not said hi to the wheelchair girl that night, I wouldn't have the most precious things in my life right now. Edit. Okay, since this got a little attention, I'll provide a bit more detail. Like I said before, after approaching the girl, let's call her Y in the wheelchair, we hung out the rest of the night and exchanged contact numbers. I did not intend to pursue her romantically, even though she was actually very attractive. Her disability was temporary. She told me she had passed out in the bathtub, hit her head, and when she woke up, she couldn't feel her legs. She was doing physiotherapy. As far as I know, I believe she started walking a couple of years after meeting her. So we were buddies for a while. I would push her chair all over town and made sure she was accepted in my group of friends. Even though my friends made jokes about me liking her, I never put myself out there as someone who was interested, and she always shut those jokes down and kind of belittled me as if I was not good enough for her. Which was fine. I took it as banter between friends. The night I met my wife, I took Y home because, well, she was in a wheelchair and it was around 3 a.m. We sat outside her house and talked until around 7 a.m. We talked about everything, and she asked if I liked her friend, my wife. I said yes, and she asked if I wanted her to give it a little push. I said I didn't need that and that I preferred things to happen naturally. that I would approach her friend on my own terms. And that was that. Well, why she didn't like that. Not that I didn't accept her help, but that I liked her friend. Apparently, I had been leading her on for weeks by being nice and considerate of her disability. I didn't know it when I first approached her, but she later confessed she didn't have a lot of friends, so I tried to be one. Even if I had been romantically interested in her, which I obviously wasn't, she would often assure me I had no chance with her. Thinking back, I guess she was negging me? Well, it worked. I had absolutely no interest in her romantically. And after hanging out for weeks, I actually stopped liking her because she would create drama everywhere we went. Shouting at waitresses, bullying bouncers in overcrowded bars to let her in because she was in a wheelchair, playing psychological games with my friends. The list goes on. After finding out I was interested in her friend, she canceled dinner with me and my friends and went to the restaurant where her friend worked, created a scene, and told her not to see me ever again. Her friend told her to calm down and still wanted to meet up at the same bar we always went to. They came and Y spent the whole night bad-mouthing me to my friends. Every time I was talking to anyone in the bar, especially girls, she would come over, start shouting, and tell them I wasn't worth anything. I had no clue why she was acting that way, but it turned out she liked me the whole time and told my friends I was acting like a teenager leading her on. Even though she constantly belittled me in front of everyone, I had to come clean with her friend and said I never showed interest in Y, that I actually liked her and wanted to take her out. Y reacted badly. Her friend is now my wife, and every time Y's name comes up, she still won't stop joking about how her foot still hurts even years after that incident. I spent the next weeks trying to turn my friends against me, even though they had known me for decades and knew I wasn't this mean person she was trying to make me out to be. I don't regret any of it. I was always fair and never showed any interest beyond friendship with her. When she asked me if I was into her friend, I straight up told her yes. I'm happy to have met her and that she introduced me to my wife. I hope she is well and healthy, but we don't keep in touch. Story 6. So a few years back, I lived in Nice, south of France for a while. As a musician, I would make a bit of extra cash busking, and one day I figured I'd go and busk at the Promenade des Anglais by the sea. It's usually packed, and it's generally a pleasant place to be. I set up, played a couple of songs, and was doing pretty well, making a decent amount of money. Then suddenly, not one, but two of my guitar strings snapped. I even remember I was playing The Scientist at the time. I was massively gutted and decided to cut my losses early. I stormed off home, by the station, in a bit of a sulk about having to restring my guitar and cutting short what was essentially one of my most productive days of busking since moving there. Literally 1 hour later, my phone started blowing up with family and friends freaking out and asking if I was at the promenade. It was Bastille Day 2016. The truck drove into the same crowd I was playing to, killing 86 people, including my then-girlfriend's uncle. I had two other friends who were among the 458 injured. I moved home the next month because it was too much, and I haven't been back since. It's hard to explain. Sometimes I think I was super lucky, and sometimes I just cry and wonder why I was spared and others weren't. It's surreal, and despite what people think, it's a truly horrible feeling. Story 7. One day when I was about 11 years old, I went to a farmer's market with my father. While we were there, I saw a street performer who was juggling, and I absolutely loved watching him. So I decided I was going to learn to juggle. A few months later, I started 6th grade, and my middle school had a juggling club after classes 1 day a week, where the very same guy I saw performing at the farmer's market would be teaching kids to juggle. So of course I went. 2 years later, when I was 13, I was looking online for some juggling forums, and r/juggling was the most active one I could find. So I created a Reddit account. Eventually, I started exploring other subreddits, and then one day I found myself in RIAMA, where I read an AMA by a guy who had loaded a bunch of camping gear onto his bicycle and spent a year and a half riding from northern Alaska to the southern tip of South America. I loved cycling, I loved camping, and at the time I had recently returned home from my first international trip to Costa Rica, a country he went through on his journey, and absolutely loved that. So the way most 13-year-olds obsess over something, I developed a bit of an obsession for bicycle touring. Finally, the summer when I was 16 years old, I felt ready to pitch the idea to my parents. though on a much smaller scale. So one day I borrowed my mom's bike because the bike I had at the time had no way to carry my stuff, and I took whatever camping gear I could find in our garage and haphazardly bungeed it to the back of the bike. Then I rode to a state park about 40 miles from our house that we'd driven to many times before. I camped there for the night, then biked back home the next day. I absolutely loved it. So the next summer, it wasn't such a surprise to my parents when I pitched the idea of spending 4 days biking 200 miles, again camping in state parks each night. After that, I was going into my senior year of high school. I realized that perhaps my best opportunity to do some big, crazy, year-long bike camping adventure would be before I got stuck with a bunch of college debt, and then a career I couldn't easily leave, etc. So I decided to take a gap year after high school. After finishing high school in 2017, I realized that long-term traveling would require more money than I had. So after spending one last summer hanging out with my friends from high school before they scattered across the country for college, I took what little money I did have and went off on my most ambitious bike trip up to that point, spending 20 days cycling 1,300 miles around Lake Michigan, starting and ending at my home in southern Wisconsin. When I returned from the Lake Michigan trip, I had $2 in change to my name, so I quickly found a job, selling my soul to the world of retail for the better part of the next 2 years. The first 2 weeks of October of 2018, I took my vacation time from work and flew my bike out to Asheville, North Carolina, to spend those 2 weeks cycling up the Blue Ridge Parkway and part of Skyline Drive before turning east to Washington, D.C. And then, last summer, I decided it was finally time. I quit my job in early July and then spent the next month and a half preparing for that big, crazy bike ride I dreamed of for so long. In mid-August, I was finally ready, and I left my home in Wisconsin with the vague goal of riding to Seattle and down the Pacific coast. I spent the better part of the next 7 months cycling 5,300 miles around the country, turning east from San Diego into Arizona. In mid-March of this year, I was hanging out in Sedona, Arizona, waiting for the nighttime temperatures at the Grand Canyon to warm up a bit, when the coronavirus really started to take a turn for the worse. I was worried that airports and train stations might start shutting down, and not wanting to be halfway across the country from my family if and when that happened, I decided to bike the final 30 miles from Sedona up to Flagstaff and get on an Amtrak back home to the Midwest. Since then, I've been back to work, saving up some money for my next adventure. Now that I've seen most of the US that I want to, I'm starting to think of doing some international bike touring, and I'm pretty excited about the possibility of New Zealand once they reopen their borders. Eventually, I intend to go back to college, but for the time being, I'm not in any rush to do that. But when it does happen, I'll surely be studying in a field that will allow me to continue to travel extensively. Story 8. In high school, I took an intermediate biology course. I had never done biology before, but was good at science generally, so I thought the intermediate course would be a good fit. My science teacher from a couple of years earlier happened to walk into my class to talk to the biology teacher, and she spotted me in the class. She asked me what grades I had gotten the previous year. I told her, and she nodded and left. A minute later, she came back in and asked me to gather my belongings and leave the class. I was pretty sure I was in trouble for something I couldn't recall. She led me to another classroom and sat me down on an empty chair. Then she just started teaching. Turns out she was running the advanced class that year and just decided to take me as a student. I went on to take biology at undergrad level and then a master's. I ended up doing a PhD in immunology and now work as an advisor for pharma companies. It gets better though. I decided I wanted to do my master's in London and met a girl on the way. We are now 10 years in and own a house together. All that because that teacher happened to look in my direction. Story 9. When I was 18, I used some spray-on hair dye for a Halloween costume. It looked amazing, so I decided to go get it permanently dyed for the first time. This in turn made me incredibly attractive to a girl who was into that sort of thing, whom I began to date. We were in school, so when the year was over, I looked at my savings and realized I had enough to purchase a car, and that way I could drive over to her town and see her when we weren't in school together. Because I suddenly had a car, my parents realized I was more independent, which made them reevaluate their current hometown. See, they had both grown up in a big city, but they moved to a smaller town to raise my siblings and me. When they saw that we were adults, they decided they didn't need to live in that smaller town anymore. And then they moved back to that bigger city. Well, this meant that I took a work term in that bigger city where I met a coworker who helped me see where my relationship with this girl was not healthy, so I eventually decided it would be best to leave it. When I moved back to school at the end of my work term, one of my friends needed to go to the city where my parents lived for some paperwork, and because I had a car and I liked that big city, I offered to drive her over. This led to a long chat in the car where she and I got to know each other really well. We eventually became each other's best friend, after which point we started dating. In comparing this relationship to the previous one, I can see how this one is so much more healthy, and I understand that much more about healthy relationships. Storytime. At 13, I was listening to the radio when a friend stopped by for a few hours. He told me my taste in music was rubbish and twisted the dials to a show that played prog house. He stopped listening as he moved on to another musical phase, but I didn't. It completely reshaped my musical taste from pop-style dance music to serious prog house. One of the artists I heard that night struck a chord in me that I will remember forever. It started me down a path that encompassed a lot of DJing, promoting nights, and podcasting. I met my best friends through shared music taste at university. I met loads of the scene's DJs. I still listen to that song. Fast forward to 18 years later, I met a girl at a gig from that same artist I heard back when I was 13. 2 years later, we were married, and now we're trying for kids. All because one friend came over and was critical of the radio station I had on. Story 11. The year I graduated high school, I was dating a guy who lived 1,000 miles away. My plans were to go to college in the state he lived in, but work the summer in the state I lived in. I must say our relationship was pretty rocky, but I was still going to go through with things, even though at that point I had tried breaking up with him many times. He was pretty controlling. I went for an interview at the beginning of summer. I was straightforward and told them my plans for moving at the end of summer. They said they wanted someone who would be staying past summer. So I applied for a bunch of other jobs, one being a grocery store about 10 minutes from my house. Of all the places I applied, I really decided to pursue keeping up with my application process with them. They lost my first application, so I filled out another one, and after a week or so, ended up calling just about every day to see if my application had been looked at. Eventually, the manager of the position I applied for agreed to let me come in for an interview. After one with her, one at corporate, a screening and so on, they told me I got the job. Well, maybe a week or so into me getting the job, I took my money in the back to be counted and saw this really good-looking guy. Oh my gosh, I smiled so hard my face hurt and I had butterflies in my stomach. I asked the girl training me what his name was and she told me. Turns out he saw me working one day when he was off the clock and was pretty taken aback as well. We have been together a little over 9 years, married for over 6.5 years, have a 1.5-year-old little boy, and are now expecting twin girls. It's funny how things tend to work out, especially when you least expect it. Story 12. I was dating a girl in college. I didn't actually go to college, as I was doing an apprenticeship instead. One day I had a day off midweek and figured I would pop into college to see my old friends and chat to this girl I was dating. At the time I was very into skateboarding, so I took my skateboard into the building but had to leave it in the reception area. As luck would have it, a girl saw me, with bleached blonde hair and a pink mohawk, placed the skateboard there, and decided she was in love with me. She went to the local skate park after school until eventually she found me. We swapped numbers, and now 15 years later, we are married with 3 kids. Also, my skateboard was stolen by someone, and by the time I made my way out of the college, my brother had noticed someone carrying my board and took it back for me. As I walked out and noticed it was gone, my brother came in and asked if I was looking for my board. It was a weird day that I had no idea would impact my whole life to this point. Story 13. I was in the Navy, and for my next assignment, I asked to go to several places, but I just didn't want to be sent to Quantico, Virginia. I was an officer that managed public works. I had already done my time on the East Coast, so of course the Navy sent me to Quantico. My second son was born there with some rare and significant medical issues. The doctor who invented the surgery he needed was in New York, and Quantico was as close to him as I could have hoped to be stationed. He performed the life-saving surgery my son needed. A year later, I was going to leave the Navy, but they enticed me to stay with graduate school. I went to CU Boulder. That same son developed some additional complications. He needed a Malone ACE surgery. The doctor who brought that surgery into the U.S. was at Denver's Children's Hospital and performed his surgery. After that, I was stationed in Kings Bay, Georgia, at the submarine base. I was close to getting out, and during a security review of our site, post 9/11 security checkup, I ran into a contractor civilian that I hadn't seen in a decade since we got our undergrad degrees together in New Mexico, my home state. He was now a manager at an amazing company in Albuquerque and was building a team. A month later, he brought me out for an interview, and I have been working in my home state, close to my aging parents, in my dream job with healthy kids. I couldn't be happier. Story 14. My freshman year of high school, I had a crush on a girl. She was into theater. At the time, I was a total loser, hanging out with guys who planned on dropping out as soon as they legally could. I tried out for a play so I could spend time around this girl. I got the part, she didn't. Then I found I liked theater, and the people there were actually friendly instead of the toxic friendships I had. I became a theater kid and lost the crush on the girl after a couple of weeks. To get better parts, I decided to start taking care of myself. Lost weight, 270 to 190 pounds. Started going to the gym, doing skincare, and taking care of my hair. My clothes didn't fit anymore, so I got into fashion and streetwear. By senior year, I was clean-cut, in shape, and attractive. My theater friends had gotten me into computers and math too, so I joined an accredited mechanical engineering program. Now I'm nearly out of college with a mechanical engineering degree and a good job. Computers are a hobby. I'm working on website design for my home server right now, with SQL database design next on the list. I recently started moonlighting as a model. The friends I used to run with are still a friend group. They do whatever substances they can find, and the most successful career in the group is day shift at McDonald's. Story 15. One day in high school, I was walking the hall in between classes, and my right lens popped out of my glasses right into my hand. My English teacher just happened to see and said, "Hey, my husband can fix that. He is coming to the school today. I can help you out." In my head, I was like, this sounds too crazy to be true, but I'm really blind without them, so I agreed. Didn't know what to expect, but I was called to my teacher's room during class, and it was her planning hour, so nothing was going on. I came in and saw this scrawny, scruffy guy. My teacher's a tough, sometimes intense, but very passionate, no-nonsense kind of lady. So seeing her husband, I had a different picture in my head. A Viking, I thought. But no. Anyway, he was polite, said hello and his name, and took a look at my glasses. Apparently, the screw had just come loose. He took out a tool in his little kit, and there it was. Magic. I, for some reason, thought it was going to be a gigantic problem in process. But no, instant help for a very critical issue, which was not seeing clearly more than 2 feet away. So I asked where he went to school, and my teacher helped guide me as to programs and such. Now I'm an optician going on 6 years. The husband is also a very good friend and a respectable work associate. He got me my first job in this field in his workplace, and now I have a tight-knit work family and career, all because my lens popped out of my glasses. Extra content here. Even though I listened to what my teacher said about which college to go to, I sort of went to another because of my friends and my forgetfulness. It wasn't until a by-chance Walmart run-in with my teacher and husband a year and a half after high school that I got back on track to my actual career. In her words, "What the heck are you doing over there? Apply immediately when you get home." I did. However, I also met my wife at the other college, so I am grateful for the time there. Story 16. Called a friend when my car broke and ended up losing all agency over my life. I had lost my job in Minneapolis and drove to Milwaukee to celebrate Christmas with family back home. I didn't have much money, but I still wanted to join my friends for a New Year's party in Minneapolis, so I headed back up in the afternoon. My car threw a belt, the tensioner died too, and instead of calling a tow truck, I called an old friend in the area for help to save money. After a multiple hours-long debacle, we ended up at his dad's house, who he'd borrowed the truck from. His dad offered me a job, so I ended up moving back to Milwaukee and eventually renting a flat from my grandma. In Minneapolis, it was me and friends. I had no responsibilities, no obligations, except the occasional trip home to see family, and my life was truly mine. I didn't even have any financial pressure. I was free to explore myself and expand who I was, and every day seemed to have endless hours. Life was fantastic. Because I moved home, I'm now a major support for my sister's mental health. I got into some bad relationships, including a complicated one, and ended up with a dog with separation anxiety. I'm taking care of my now 90-year-old grandmother and stuck in a relationship I get nothing back from. I went from my everyday being mine to snatching a few minutes at a time here and there for myself and devoting the rest of my time to parents, codependent friends, my pup, who I do love, my boyfriend, siblings, my job, etc., etc. I never even wanted to own a house because I didn't want to waste my days raking, mowing, shoveling, fixing and painting. And now I have to do all that and more for my grandma and for a house that I won't even inherit. It seems like suddenly everyone always needs things from me and I never get anything for myself. I've lost my life completely because I didn't call a tow truck. Story 17, or directly me. But my husband, about 4 years ago while in the military, he was recommended to apply for a job that would have him based in Hawaii. We're Australian. This would have been an amazing job with good pay, and we both would have been moving over there. Only 3 people were applying for the job. My husband did all of his paperwork and had to get some of his higher-ups to write recommendations on the application, and then another had to formally send the application for him. The cutoff time was 12 p.m. The superior had it sent in sometime between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m., the day it was due. Unfortunately, it was daylight savings time, so we were an hour behind Sydney and the cutoff was 12 p.m. Sydney time. He completely missed out on having this opportunity because the superior left it to the last minute on the day. We're so glad he missed out. We would have had to live in America for the past 4 years, which I hear wasn't a great time, and we now have a house of our own and are doing quite well. Hubby left the military and now works for another company that supplies for them. Life is all right. Story 18. I dig for hidden history at garage and estate sales, but I never know if or what I'm going to find. Looking more closely or a few minutes longer has made the difference to really satisfying results. I had been picking through an estate sale that was known for its history, but after 2+ hours hadn't found anything remarkable. As I was exiting the garage, I saw a handwritten sign that said basement with an arrow. I had actually been in the basement on an earlier visit and thought I had examined every corner. In a cramped closet with heating pipes, I found a box of books. Many were from the 1980s on cat care, except for one. A beautifully bound book was in there from 1876 titled Pennsylvania Soldiers' Orphan Schools. Inside was a military pass from 1861. What a rabbit hole I tumbled down. If you want to know the significance of such a random lucky find, look up the name Elizabeth Hutter. You won't find much, maybe a decent description on the Find a Grave site. This woman and her husband should have been First Lady and President. Instead, when they had it all, they seemed to give up their Washington political and society reputation and chose to return and serve their state of Pennsylvania. I give talks, virtual now, on these kinds of discoveries and share the importance of people like the Hutters who remain unjustly unsung. All because I decided to open one more door. Story 19. Last year, I was at a festival in a city a couple of miles south from the village I live in. At around 1:20 in the morning, me and my 2 friends had to rush to get the 1:30 bus home, because if not, we would have had to wait about an hour and we were getting tired. On our way to the bus, I decided to run down an alley and take a quick bathroom break. This led to us missing the bus. Me and my 2 friends had an argument and one of us stormed off into the McDonald's beside the bus station. He was in there for longer than we expected, so we called him, only to have a girl answer the phone saying he was sitting with them and that we should come in. We went in and saw him with a group of 5 girls, and we all sat there drinking cans of Heineken until we got kicked out. I got one of the girls' Snapchats, and this resulted in texting back and forth. Eventually, we met up and started dating. 3 months ago, we broke each other's hearts. The pain I'm feeling right now is all because I decided to take that detour. Story 20. Around a decade ago, I was 22, and after years of academic failure, video games, and aimless drifting, I grabbed a summer job working as a maintenance guy for a parking garage so I could make ends meet. My coworker, who I will call Jake, was quiet, stoic, mysterious, and spoke in short, monotone sentences. 3 or so months in, he invited me over for a beer, and against my overwhelming social anxiety and isolationist habits, and my rules about hanging out with coworkers, I said, "Sure, why not?" So we both climbed into his old beater and went for a drive, and ended up at this dilapidated warehouse. It was just off a subway line, tucked into a weird little corner of overgrowth, and on the other side of the line were expensive housing developments and a brand new retail outlet. It was quite literally on the wrong side of the tracks, and I was nervous as he led me in. The interior of that space was an absolute wonderland. Couches hung from the ceiling with chains in front of huge projectors hooked up to thumping subwoofers. Turntables stacked upon turntables, poles, zines, paintings, and graffiti, and colors bursting from every corner. There were rooms lit up to look like a dazzling night sky, complete with model planes hung on string and LED clouds pulsing rainbow rhythms in time to the music. Kit-bashed photography darkroom doors led to checkered dance floors, where somebody was inevitably mixing something powerful of their own. Somebody had built a whole ball pit and decorated it with blacklit neon jungle faux flora. Holes had been cut between the different floors, and sturdy wooden ladders had been installed, so every floor could be connected without exiting into the plain hallways and concrete stairwells that mask this glorious explosion of creativity. And the people who maintained this marvelous work were utterly fantastic. Artists, musicians, welders, mathematicians, college professors, makers and designers and coders. I got caught up in a three-way conversation with a professional UFO investigator, a woman who designed her own calendar photo shoots, and a guy who used 3D printers to build bigger and better 3D printers. Every surface was a canvas. Every person was whole and vibrant. Every doorway was a portal to something and somewhere new. And I'd never seen or conceived of any living situation so spectacular in my life. I returned to Jake's side to find him and his husband grinning at my reaction. I had been led to a burner loft, a home for those folks who make the yearly pilgrimage to Burning Man. I decided then and there that I was going to find a way to live there and contribute, and it was the best and most impactful decision I'd ever made in my life. Story 21. I had just moved to Ohio, and a couple of new friends wanted to go down to the skate park. I was drinking, it was late, but it sounded fun. Long story short, I ended up bailing off a ramp and broke my wrist, knee, and foot. That little trip to the hospital sucked, but what really changed things was the crazy amount of painkillers they prescribed me. It's been over 15 years, but I'm pretty sure I remember getting 3 refills, and each refill had like 45 to 60 pills in it. Boy, did they take the pain away, and it made my injuries stop hurting too. When I ran out, it was fine. I wasn't addicted or anything, but I had a friend who sold them, so I figured I could buy a couple. Just make sure I was healed before I stopped taking them. Then it was, I'm young and have no expenses. I'm not addicted, I'm just partying. It's not like I'm stealing to pay for an addiction, haha. Then it was, it's really hard to get through a workday without them, so I'll just keep taking them. I mean, they're cheap, at the time, and I don't really have any responsibilities. Plus, I'm in a band. I'm supposed to be partying. Then there was some stuff in the middle until now I was stealing from stores every day so I could afford to keep using, because I was hopelessly addicted. I'd burned every bridge I'd ever made, mostly for stealing, I deserved it, lost everything that had any monetary value, was sleeping in my car. I used to pride myself on my reputation. I was proud of the fact that not one person could say I'd ever wronged them, or stolen from them, or told major lies. I used to have my friends' house keys because I was the only one they trusted. I used to really be proud of that. But at that time, you couldn't let me in your house, or I'd have stolen from you. I'm ashamed to admit this, but I figure if I keep saying it, then I won't forget the shame. And maybe someone who's considering trying, or in the early stages of opioid use, might have second thoughts. Let me just say, stay far away from that. It grabs hold tight while telling you you're fine, and by the time you realize you might not be, it's far, far too late. You do just about anything to avoid withdrawal. I used to describe withdrawals like this. At first you're afraid it's going to kill you, then you become afraid that it won't. It's almost that bad. Anyway, long story, a little bit shorter, I got in legal trouble, I overdosed and nearly died, and I had completely given up on myself until my daughter was born. I'll admit, the day she was born, before we went into the operating room, I snuck into the bathroom and used. That's how important the drug had become to me. I wasn't going to miss the birth, but I thought I needed it first. Anyway, when I held her for the first time, I broke. Like bawling my eyes out broke. The person I used to be, that I thought was gone, was screaming and fighting with everything to get through to me. You can't do this to her. You can't make her go through what you went through. She deserves a father. I'll admit it took me about 6 more months. But I got clean, started getting my life back together, paid off my student loan so I could build some credit. I'm over 6 years clean now. Married to the mother of both my children. I'll never understand why she stood by me through all of that. I certainly didn't deserve it. With 2 kids. I had my own business, but COVID kind of put a stop to that. For now, I hope. I'm happy. I'm clean. I've even rebuilt some of my old relationships and some of my reputation. Some people will never forgive me, and I don't blame them. Maybe they'll see someday I'm serious, but if not, that's okay too. Because after a decade of having no future at all, it looks pretty bright from here. I know it wasn't just skateboarding that led to this. I could have stopped, but over-prescribing painkillers has got to stop. And finally, I'm going to end this post like I do every time I talk about addiction. I was as bad as you can get. I promise you, you can get clean. You deserve to be happy. You deserve a good life. You deserve forgiveness. And you deserve to get clean. Please get help. If I can do it, I know you can. It's tough for a couple of weeks, I won't lie. But the rest of your life after that will be so much better. If you need help, message me. I will answer, and I'll help in any way I can. But please, please get help. Nobody deserves to live like that. Story 22. Dated a girl in college. Graduated a semester before her and started a master's because a job fell through. I wasn't crazy focused on doing a master's, but I needed to feel productive while job hunting, and if we got jobs in our city, I would have done it. I stayed at my same school because of the ex still being there. She got a job across the country when she graduated. I job hunted like a madman and found one 2 weeks later. I abandoned the master's after a semester. Of course, I moved to find out she was already cheating and moving on in the time it took me to follow her. Spent 6 months out there and had no idea what I wanted from life. But when I left, it was for a job in quality. I'm an industrial engineer. Quality is one of the focus areas of the field. I never wanted to work in quality, but I strangely liked it. So while in crisis mode, I decided to move home. Home was the city with the master's program I was already admitted into. Didn't have a job when I moved, and I only justified it by saying, I'll finish that master's, it'll be productive. And then I got a new job in quality. Finished the master's in night classes. Well, the butterfly effect. During my master's specializing in quality, working in quality, I realized what I really want to do with my life. And that led to me applying for a few PhD programs. And that led to me being back across the country, different place, getting a PhD in engineering to get hyper-specialized in the area I really want to spend my life working in. And it started with taking a semester of master's classes to stay in proximity to an ex. I absolutely would not have made the decision to start a master's in engineering after that breakup. I think I would have gotten an MBA eventually, but my education in engineering would have been done. Story 23. I have severe ADHD, so I show up early to everything for fear of being late. Showed up to a bar where I was meeting some friends. Nobody was there yet, so I sat at the bar, something I never do, to order a drink. Someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "That's my seat." And I responded with, "Sorry, man," as I was turning to get up, only to see that it wasn't a man, but an attractive woman. She said, "Damn, you steal my seat and you think I'm a dude." I got flustered and offered to buy her a drink. She gestured to the drink in her hand, and now I was out of any kind of response. I'm not the type to pick up a girl at the bar anyway, but this whole interaction was way out of my comfort zone. Just as I was saying my fumbled apologies, a small group of my friends walked in, and I immediately latched on to them and retreated to the back of the bar where we usually sit. This woman that I'd been so gracefully interacting with pulled one of my friends aside, but I was beelining for my safety net and barely noticed. A few minutes later, the rest of my friends showed up and brought this girl over with them. Apparently, she had asked about me. My friends did a great job of talking me up, and 7 years later, we're married with a newborn and a dog. Life is strange. Story 24. I was friends with a weird guy in high school, in that we said hi and ate lunch together at school sometimes. He had a crush on me, and I definitely didn't reciprocate. He was a little too weird for my taste, but he was nice and harmless enough. He convinced his friend to invite me to hang out with them one day. I was bored and figured it couldn't be worse than sitting around my house doing nothing. So I said sure and went and hung out with him. Turns out his friend was kind of weird too, but I was hooked. I ended up staying later after the original guy went home that first day, and it was the first of many hangouts between the original kid's friend and me. That was almost 8 years ago. He wasn't ready to date at that time, and we stayed loosely in touch over the years. Eventually, the stars aligned. He'd gotten out of a 3-year relationship, and I'd gotten out from a 4-year marriage. I reached back out to him, and now we've been married for a year and have a baby. We still laugh about how we met. Honestly, I couldn't be happier. It's like a dream come true, as I've always felt he was the one who got away. Story 25. I eavesdropped on a conversation at work, and it changed my entire life. I worked at a sandwich shop. I had just come back from maternity leave and was feeling the pressure to do more with my life now that I had a little one. I was also coming from a very judgmental family that was not okay with having a young, unmarried, and uneducated mom in their family tree. I heard my manager talk to a lady at the register about taking a phlebotomy course. The lady said she was doing it to get a feel for healthcare before committing to nursing school. I didn't think much else about the conversation at the time. A month later, my grandma basically had me cornered, insisting I do something different with my life. She was really pressuring me to make some sort of plan for education, and I was a weepy hormonal mess still with PPD, and finally just blurted out, I want to go to phlebotomy school. She asked why, and I quoted what the lady told my manager at the register. My mom was a nurse, so my grandma thought this would especially fit. She said, all right, let's pull up classes on the computer, find a school, and I'll pay for them. And 3 months later, I had an interview at a plasma center. I was out of school. I had the skills to stick folks, but I wasn't sure if I loved it. Still, I just kind of went with it. I got the job and quit the sandwich shop. It's been 3 years, and I'm still there. I love my job, and it quite literally fell into my lap. I'm now the supervisor and make double what I made as a shift lead at a sandwich shop. I've also started applying for nursing schools. Story 26. Last month, I was very hungover one morning and was in a bad mood, so I felt I needed to do something small to feel productive. I decided to fill up my tank of gas because I had been neglecting to do so for the prior few days. I drove over to a gas station right by the exit of a highway. When I was filling up my car, I was watching traffic exit the highway onto an intersecting street when another car blew a red light, hit one car, redirected itself, and used another car as a ramp to launch itself 6 feet in the air, landing on its roof. Being less than 100 feet away, I immediately sprinted over to the wreck, hearing screams of 2 girls inside. The car was starting to smoke badly and catch fire in the engine, so I immediately tried to open a door. The passenger side door was completely stuck, so I ran around to the driver's side door and started to yank at it. It budged a little, and as the engine started to really catch fire, I literally yanked the door off the car somehow and crawled inside to take off the driver's seatbelt, pull her out, and then do the same for the passenger. Neither were seriously injured, but the car erupted in flames less than a minute after I got the second girl out. People stood around and watched as I helped out, but nobody joined me, likely fearing an explosion in the car. Story 27. This is sure to be buried. But I was roommates with my sister and was using Tinder. It had just come out and was becoming popular. I met a girl on there, but she didn't talk to me too much or try to drive the conversation. Just figured she wasn't interested. Fast forward a week, it's Halloween. I get home from class and it's going on 10 p.m. and I have a headache and just want to stay home. My sister insisted I go with her to the Halloween dance a few towns over because a guy she liked would be there. I begrudgingly went because it was my sister, and it was rare she had the confidence to pursue something like this. We got there. I was bored just trying to chill in the corner because of my head. After a while, I went to try and find her, and this super attractive girl walked by, and my brain did that thing where you know that person, but have no idea why. Then it hit me. She was the girl from Tinder. I stood a ways off, watching and trying to be sure it was her. I pulled out my phone and showed my sister while trying to nonchalantly point her out. I asked if it was the same girl. She agreed but wanted to leave. Now Tinder girl was staring at me and giving me that same blank look of mystified recognition. I worked up some courage and walked over to her and said hi. We talked for a few minutes and she told me she didn't even live around here. She went to university an hour away and was only here because she was visiting her sister. I got her phone number and left after an awkward encounter. We texted, went on a date a week later, dated for a year, and got married. Now we have 2 kids. Been together for about 7 years now. And it's all because my sister really wanted her brother as a wingman. Story 28. Got in a fight with my boyfriend at the time and decided I didn't want to spend the night with him, so I drove 35 minutes away to my parents' house to sleep on the couch. My mom wasn't expecting me, and I caught her on the phone having an intimate conversation with a guy we later found out was the father of a little girl my mom was a teacher for. She had met him at school during parent-teacher conferences. I confronted her and told her if she didn't tell my dad, I would. She disappeared, and I ended up driving around town to all the hotels until I found her car and demanded the front desk do a wellness check because I knew what she was planning on doing. When my dad came home calling me, asking if I knew where my mom was, I had to tell him over the phone that she had been cheating on him and that I wasn't sure where she went. And then I had to listen to my dad sob into the phone, asking me to please come home while I sat on the patio of a bar slamming whiskey shots. Sure enough, she had attempted to end her life. The ambulance wheeled her past me, but she was too out of it to know what was going on. She survived, spent several days in the mental hospital, where she told me she wanted to divorce my dad but was deciding to tell me first. Thanks. My dad, in the meantime, had decided to forgive my mom and was planning on taking her back. So I had to again be the one to tell him the bad news. Flash forward, my parents got divorced. I chose to stay with my dad. We lost the house, and she moved into a studio while I moved into a small rental with my dad. My dad hasn't been the same since and drinks himself a little closer to death every day. My mom met a guy at the mental hospital who had also tried to end his life, and they have been dating ever since and now live together. 4 years later. They're both alcoholics and have been their entire lives. My boyfriend dumped me shortly after all this, after having been together for 3 years. So 2017 still has been the worst year of my life so far. I always knew my mom had issues and wasn't in the right place, but never imagined my parents divorcing. I have severe PTSD from the night I found her at the hotel and often wonder what would have happened if I had just stayed at my boyfriend's that night instead of deciding to randomly drive over to their house. Story 29. Around 6 years ago, an acquaintance of mine at school invited me out to the disco with him. We were only really talking to each other as we both had mutual friends. I asked all of my mates if they were going, but they all weren't bothered, so I said I wasn't going. I had only recently come off an acne medication, so even though my acne was pretty much cleared up, and I had awful acne, my self-esteem was still at rock bottom. I still saw myself as ugly and worthless. Anyway, my father asked me if I was going to the disco, and I said I wasn't because none of my mates were going, but an acquaintance was going and I didn't really want to go out just with him. My parents really wanted me to get out of the house more, as they could tell I was lonely, stuck in the house all day by myself. For 3 years, when all of my mates were going to the disco, I never went because I didn't want people to see my face with my acne. The disco was on at around 9 or so, and I went for a shower at around 7:45. I don't know what hit me, but out of nowhere I suddenly got a craving to go to the disco. Suddenly I kind of wanted to go, probably because I had missed out on 3 years worth of fun, and I started to realize that worrying what others think of you is a toxic way to live, even though I was infinitely more attractive than I was when I had severe acne. I called up the acquaintance and asked him if he was still going. He said he was, and I told him I'd meet him there. We went inside and I was buzzing. I didn't really care for the music that was being played, but I was just so overjoyed to be experiencing what I had missed out on for so long. Eventually, I saw this amazingly attractive girl, and I had a crush on her the minute I laid eyes on her. My acquaintance introduced me to her, despite me protesting beforehand, warning him not to do that, as I was terrified of getting rejected. We talked for a bit, we got on very well, and we kissed a little. Fast forward almost 6 years. We're still together and still mad about each other. We live together and do everything together, like fishing, walking, cycling, etc. I always look back to that day and wonder how differently my life would have been had I not got that weird urge to go out. I've always maintained that it was fate that night that brought us together. I'll never know why I got such a sudden urge to go out with someone that I wasn't really all too friendly with. Story 30 was suffering from a stomach bug, skipped my afternoon classes cause, you know, stomach bug. What's a great way to cure that? McDonald's. McDonald's always clears out whatever's in your system, at least for me. I ordered a quarter pounder with cheese and fries with no salt. It should be important to note that I went inside because the drive-thru was packed. Stupid me didn't realize that they would prioritize the drive-thru. It took 25 minutes to get my food. I left that McDonald's to the sound of the fire whistle going off, got in my car, left the parking lot, and from that McDonald's I could see my house, which was on fire. If I hadn't gone inside and used the drive-thru, I would have been in the house when the fire started, and since it was an outlet by the only door that started the fire, I would have been trapped. So a small stomach bug led me to miss classes, go to McDonald's, and be the first person on the scene when my house was on fire. Story 31. Getting a $5 baby rabbit from a farmer's market completely changed the trajectory of my life. I immediately sobered up, had a pretty severe drinking problem, because this little animal took so much care, and I didn't trust myself to even be buzzed around her. From quitting drinking, I quit smoking. Didn't see what the point was. It was no longer fun to smoke without a beer in the other hand. I figured, why stop there with this whole self-improvement thing? So I started running, dropped 30 pounds immediately, and have never felt better. It goes on. I fell in love with the species as a whole, and we started an online store to supply good New England hay to rabbits everywhere. Because store-bought hay is so poor in quality, it's thriving to a point that Chewy.com has approached us. So yeah, that $5 purchase in a bar parking lot. And so many aspects of my life suddenly blossomed. Amazing what love can do. That little ball of fluff literally saved my life simply because I cared more about her than drinking myself into oblivion. Story 32. After college, I was interning with a congressman. It was great, but eventually I had to go make some money. The last day I was there, one of the staffers asked me to stay late and help train the next intern. It was only for about an hour or so I said sure. In that hour, a job listing from a small nonprofit got sent over to us, and the staffer, who liked me, immediately showed me. Had I left on time, I never would have seen that listing. I ended up applying and got that job, my first real job. From there, I randomly got involved in the organization's low-income energy efficiency program. I literally could not have told you the difference between a furnace and a boiler, fiberglass or cellulose. In addition, our organization had a sister organization that was a little larger and a county over. There was a girl there who was super cool that I became good friends with. Fast forward a decade, and I now write energy policy and implement energy efficiency programs with budgets in the tens of millions. I have a master's in energy policy and am on the forefront of a field that I am immensely interested in and feel has incredible potential to revolutionize the world in so many ways. Oh, and I married the super cool girl. We just had our 1-year anniversary, all because I stayed late the last day of my internship. Story 33. The summer before my freshman year of high school, I went to go get my hair cut like normal, and the lady who cut my hair had her sister-in-law there. Turns out she taught at the high school I was about to go to, and she coached the swim team. She randomly invited me to come try out, even though I'd never swum competitively or even dove into a pool before. But I ended up going and loving the sport. Through the sport, I met people who invited me to a Christian group where I eventually started following Jesus and made a bunch of friends. When I went to college, I got involved with the same Christian group, and that ended up shaping my college experience. One of the guys older than me in the group was representing his company at the career fair my senior year, and he invited me to interview where he worked. I ended up getting a job there and moving to the city I've now lived in almost 2 years. All of my closest friends are from the group I was in back in high school, and my girlfriend, who I plan to marry, I also met through this group, but only because I live where I do now. So if I hadn't got my hair cut on that specific day at that specific time and been invited to join the swim team, I have no idea what my life would look like. Story 34. When I became an adult, my grandfather began sharing stories from his youth. One in particular stuck with me and resurfaced in an unexpected way later in my life. Back in the 1950s, my grandfather Perry and his army buddy were traveling down an old state highway after a night of drinking with friends. On the way back home, Perry had lost the cap to their whiskey bottle, so he stuffed a map in the neck and sat in the passenger seat with the bottle secured between his legs. As they drove their Buick Roadmaster through an intersection, they were suddenly T-boned, and the car rolled before landing upside down in a ditch. Remarkably, no one was seriously injured or held accountable, but it was still a major event in Perry's young life. Fast forward about 60 years to 2009. I was in college and had become close friends with a guy named Jeremy, who lived about an hour away from my hometown. We shared a love of music and even formed a band together. After graduation, we went our separate ways, and for a while we lost touch. Then in 2015, out of the blue, Jeremy sent me a message asking if my grandfather's name was Perry. I told him yes, and he explained that his grandmother had recognized my unusual last name on his Facebook friend list. Her name was Joan, and she revealed something incredible. She had once been set up on a date with my grandfather, arranged by their mutual friends George and Sparky. Here's the twist. Joan never went on that date. She explained that she canceled because Perry had gotten into a bad car accident the night before. Instead, she went out with another man, whom she later married. That choice led to an entire branch of family history, children, grandchildren, and eventually Jeremy himself. Meanwhile, Perry's life went on in a completely different direction. He raised his own family, which led to my father, and then to me. Years later, I would cross paths with Jeremy in college, forming a close friendship. Two lives connected across generations, all because of one accident that changed the course of everything. Story 35. A friend and I started a small company right out of school, after sketching out an idea on a whiteboard. When we officially began, I applied to every pitch competition within 100 miles, hoping to scrape together enough money to keep us afloat. One morning, I got a call from Seattle. Apparently, late one night when I was exhausted, I had mistakenly submitted our application to an event halfway across the country. When the organizer asked if I was located in Seattle, I panicked and said, "Not yet, but we're in the process of relocating there." To my surprise, we were accepted. With little more than a beat-up Toyota, we drove out there and crashed on the floor of a friend's apartment. The event turned out to be a month-long, high-profile competition funded by Jeff Bezos. Each week came with mentoring, introductions, and Friday pitch sessions that cut half the participants. It felt like being on a reality show. Somehow, we made it to the final round, where I had to pitch in front of 600 people. Between the event prizes and some additional support, we walked away with $100,000. I was in shock, but this created a new problem. I had no real plan to move to Seattle. Yet I couldn't admit I had lied on the application. So we committed to the move, packed up our lives, and headed west. I felt like George Costanza bluffing his way through an impossible situation. Then came the miracle. For years, doctors had told my wife and me that having children would be nearly impossible. After 8 years, we had accepted that our house would remain empty. But in Seattle, our new physician referred us to a university specialist who dealt with rare cases like ours. Thanks to that chance connection, we were able to have 2 children. All of it, the startup, the move, the family, happened because I was too tired one night to double-check an application form. Story 36. Just a couple of weeks ago, my youngest child was sick, but we had run out of medicine and payday was still a few days away. Money was tight, and I only had about $3.53 left in my account. In my small town, there are only 2 gas stations, a national chain and a family-owned one. I usually avoided the family-owned one since it was more expensive. Stressed out, I drove to the ATM to double-check my balance, knowing it wasn't enough. Feeling defeated, I went for a short drive just to clear my head. On the way back, I passed the family-owned gas station and almost on a whim, decided to stop in and check their medicine prices anyway. As I walked down the medicine aisle, I noticed something on the floor. When I got closer, I realized it was a $20 bill. I picked it up and immediately looked around, but the store was empty except for the workers. I even asked if anyone had reported losing money, but they said no. At that moment, I felt like it was meant for me. With that $20, I was able to buy a couple of bottles of medicine for my child.